Insecurity combined with arrogance is good DNA for a comedian. And so is anger, aggression, and sadness. If you've had a great life and a wonderful bar mitzvah, and you've been given a lot of money, you'll make a lousy comedian. You're better off being the comedian's lawyer. I've had and continue to have a great career in comedy. First in stand-up, and over the last few decades as a director of television comedy series from Designing Women, The Bob Newhart Show, Golden Girls Mad About You, Seinfeld, Friends, and Curb Your Enthusiasm, TV movies, my series of interviews with comedians called Inside Comedy, with several stops in between, but there were also doldrums along the way, personal and professional. What got me through them was my love of comedy, life itself, and my friendship with admiration for and work with other comedians. I knew most of them. I interviewed, worked with, and directed, kvetched with them, and broke bread, and opened for headlines for and directed the best of them. This book is not just my story, it's their stories. Why me? Besides being there are things I'm too modest to tell you. That I may be the only comedian to have made Elie Wiesel laugh. That I was admired by the great New Yorker writer and humorist S.J. Perlman, and by Philip Roth, Kenneth Tynan, and Harold Pinter. That I was virtually adopted by Groucho Marx, and many of the legendary old-timers such as Jack Benny and George Burns at the Hillcrest Country Club. I also directed Burt Reynolds at the height of his considerable fame, before he self-destructed. Johnny Carson was my mentor and invited me to be a guest and a host The Tonight Show 140 times. I believe I am now at the cutting edge of comedy as one of the directors of Curb Your Enthusiasm with my old friend and fellow kvetcher, Larry David, and my series over the last few years, Inside Comedy, is a documentary interview show, a conversation with more than 75 comedians and comic actors. It's a funny thing about comedy. When you give your life to it, it can become a serious business. I spent my life in and outside the comedy world, and it is a world, a universe unto itself. I was a popular stand-up comic for 3 decades. I was 25 when I first appeared at the Bitter End on Bleecker Street in Greenwich Village. I usually prowled the tiny stage in a worn brown corduroy jacket. This was 1968, and I did things like improvising sermons based on the Old Testament. That wasn't too much of a reach because I had been a pre-rabbinical student at Hebrew Theological College near Chicago before comedy found me. But this book is not just about my life in comedy. It's about my life and comedy in the last half of the last century. I lived through a time when stand-up comedy was a poor relation to other forms of entertainment, when being on a successful sitcom was nothing to write home about. But I think I was one of the group of people, along with Steve Martin, Richard Pryor, George Carlin, and a few others, who pushed stand-up forward as an art form and made comedy an important part of the culture. A comic hosting a television show used to be rare, but I hosted 3, Music Scene, which featured artists like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Joe Cocker, Noonday, a half-hour midday talk show, and The David Steinberg Show, about making a TV talk show, thus a precursor to Gary Shandling's The Larry Sanders Show. But being successful at something I loved didn't always make me happy. Like many comics, I struggled with bouts of depression, and despite the affections of beautiful, accomplished women like Tuesday Weld, Mary Ellen Marks, Susan Sarandon, and Carly Simon, I too often thought of the Book of Job when I should have had my mind on other things. It must have been my Talmudic training. I had the only little black book in Hollywood that was written in Aramaic. Unlike many comics of my generation, however, I did manage to avoid heavy drug and alcohol use. With some luck, I was able to dodge the heroin that floated through Second City and Saturday Night Live. killing John Belushi, the cocaine that undid Richie Pryor, and the alcoholic demons that brought down Chris Farley and George Carlin. But I was there and I saw it all. To paraphrase beat poet Allen Ginsberg, I saw the best comedy minds of my generation destroyed by an angry fix.